Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon, and before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We are now on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you could press that big red button down below, I would really appreciate that. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future episodes. Now that the preamble is out of the way, uh, that's a wrap on the preseason. The Milwaukee Bucks fell to the Oklahoma City Thunder at home 116-112. It was a close game, not necessarily throughout the first quarter, but throughout the second half. It was a very close and fun, entertaining game. The Bucks end the preseason 3-1, and they don't go with an undefeated 4-0 record. So the championship race is off. The Thunder are repeating. We can just uh, break it down to layman's terms there. But anyways, these guys that I'll get into a little bit later, Cole Anthony finished with 21 points and 2 assists. Ryan Rollins, 13 points, 2 assists, a steal, a block, finished with a plus 11 in the plus minus department. I believe that was best on the team. Giannis just really forced his will on the Oklahoma City Thunder at times when it seemed like no other kind of offense was developing at all. It was just Giannis backpacking and driving with reckless abandon to the rim, as we've known him to do. 16.7 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and a block in his first kind of, more extended playtime of the preseason. So I actually, while this game was happening, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take notes. It's something that I don't necessarily do all the time. I feel like when I want to talk about games, it's not really scripted. It's kind of just free flowing. But um, throughout the game, I figured because it's the Thunder and they were playing all of their main guys, like usually their main starting group, except for Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Williams actually, who was still out. So it wasn't necessarily the full team, but most of their impact guys were playing, and they played for, uh, if not just the first half, then maybe a little bit into the third quarter. But Shea and those kinds of guys played just the first half. But my notes, I feel like it was kind of sloppy, but the things that I wrote in here were turnover city, because early on in the first quarter, the Oklahoma City Thunder did Oklahoma City Thunder things. They were doing, and I actually have that in my notes verbatim, historic defense doing historic defense things. Thunder are suffocating. Cason Wallace is legitimately one of the best defenders I've ever seen, and I'm sticking by that. That's one of my opinions that will continue to age well, I feel like, as the years go by, because Cason Wallace is absolutely unbelievable in passing lanes on the ball. He's so aggressive. He's so strong, but he has a very agile frame, and he's super athletic. Cason Wallace is just, I can talk about him for days and days. There were a few plays where, let's say, AJ Green had the ball and he just gets ripped by Cason Wallace on the right wing, and then Cason's also slapping a hand down on the ball when Giannis is turning and trying to spin into the paint. Just gets in the passing lanes at the top of the key and runs it out for an easy dunk. Cason Wallace just doing Cason Wallace things, along with Alex Caruso and Lou Dort and the rest of that vaunted Oklahoma City Thunder defense. But what I will say, though, through the first quarter, through the first half, it was the Bucks' 3-point shooting keeping them in it. Whether it was KPJ hitting a 4-point play and looking away before the shot went down, which was absolutely cold. Gary Trent Jr., who I believe is an underrated ball handler, he shook Alex Caruso and stepped back for a three on the right wing, and I was like, yes, okay, I love that. Keep doing that. Feed me more, please. So there were those two guys hitting both off the catch and off the dribble. The Also, the Giannis off the floor minutes went way better than I expected. At least while Giannis was still, you know, checking in and out of the game. It was the end of the first quarter. He went out with around like 3 minutes left, and I was thinking, okay, the Bucks made it a manageable game after going down by 11 or 12 points already in the first quarter. And Giannis goes out with 3 minutes left, and I write down, this is the start of the Giannis off the floor minutes. Let's see what happens here. And it went pretty amazing. The Bucks ended the first quarter up 37-33 after Cole Anthony checked into the game and he just injected energy into the team. His first two possessions, really, so he started on defense. So his first defensive possession, steal, runs it out for a floater. Then his next offensive possession comes down, penetrates the paint, finds Kyle Kuzma for a catch and shoot three. And actually, something that I wanted to mention towards the end of the first quarter, there was a crazy hand holding foul that I have never seen before in the NBA up until this point on Cason Wallace, where Cole Anthony was near the center circle or near half court, just kind of dribbling out the clock, and Cason Wallace was up defending him. and he reaches his hand out, and he and Cole Anthony just start like grabbing at each other's hands, like how MMA fighters kind of go in for like the grapple in the beginning of a fight. And then Casey Wallace gets called for a foul. I have never seen that before, and I really hope that doesn't continue because that was just completely ridiculous. But it was through the first half, it was the Bucks 3-point shooting that was really keeping them in it, even though guys like AJ Green and Gary Trent Jr. weren't necessarily hitting everything. Those guys could barely throw a rock in the ocean. But okay, big thing that I wanted to talk about though is that it appeared as though the Bucks were sorely missing Myles Turner in this game. Of course, Bobby Portis got the starting nod in his place, and going up against a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a huge bruiser, he's physical, great offensive rebounder. Bobby Portis, simply put, just could not hold him, and Giannis couldn't be in 3 or 4 places at once. And when it was Bobby and Isaiah Hartenstein one on one in the paint, he just could not handle him straight up. And this was where, even though Myles Turner isn't necessarily the biggest bruiser in the world, his shot blocking capabilities and just ability to stand pat in the paint and be a crazy rim deterrent, they were sorely missing that ability, that like the ability of one of the best shot blockers in the NBA. Because there was basically no resistance for a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein, who finished with, I think, either a double double or somewhat close with about 13 points or 8 to 10 boards. Um, he was pretty fantastic, and as well as Shea Gilgis Alexander, who I don't even feel like I really need to talk about. He had 23 points in the first half on 8 for 10 shooting, and he is just so amazing to watch because it really appeared as though he was going half speed, like he couldn't really even, not that he couldn't care to be there, but that he the way that his game works is just that he's never in a rush and that you can never throw him out off of his pace. Similar to a Luka Doncic, he'll go as fast or as slow as he wants to. Um, Incredible at baiting for contact and jumping into guys for fouls, which I do think, maybe this is a controversial opinion, I do believe that to be a skill because back when Dwayne Wade and Kobe Bryant in the mid 2000s were throwing pump fakes, getting their guy to jump in the air and jumping into them for a foul, the commentators would applaud it and talk about how tactically amazing that was and how smart that was. And I don't know why we don't do that nowadays for guys like Shea, where they are like, he's a complete master at getting guys in the air, jumping in for contact, and still staying focused and composed enough to hit the shot. That's his bread and butter. But yeah, 23 points, and it looked like he couldn't even care to be there. So that was the big thing. I was coming into this game. I wanted KPJ and Cole Anthony and Ryan Rollins to each get their kind of fair share of guarding Shea, and it didn't end up well for any of them. So that's going to be something going forward. But yeah, again, without Myles Turner or any kind of real resistance outside of Giannis at the basket, there wasn't really much hope to stop any would-be attackers of the rim because, not that Bobby Portis is the worst defender in the world. He's just not really suited well enough to act as their rim deterrent center, like roaming the floor and steering guys away from the rim. It's not in his repertoire necessarily. But um, moving forward, gave you the stats in the beginning for Cole Anthony and Ryan Rollins, and I'll talk about how they combined for 34 points on an incredibly efficient night. I think Cole was 4 for 7 from three or 5 for 7. And then Ryan Rollins was, I think, 5 for 6 from the field overall, and he only missed one of his 3-point attempts. These guys were absolutely unbelievable in terms of controlling the offense. And not only that, but their defensive effort was just completely in another stratosphere. I also have it in my notes too that this happened, I think, in the second quarter. Um, when Aaron Wiggins of the Thunder gets the ball and he's out in transition, or at least he receives a pass from somebody on a maybe a 2-on-1 fast break, and he goes up for the layup, and Ryan Rollins is there in front of him to contest. He goes perfectly vertical on the contest. If you were to show someone a textbook way to contest a layup on the fast break, you would show them Ryan Rollins contesting Aaron Wiggins right there, straight up, no contact, above the shoulders or anything, no foul whatsoever. And at the same time as Ryan Rollins going up perfectly vertical, you have Cole Anthony flying in from behind to block Aaron Wiggins' shot with his elbow. It was maybe the most beautiful sequence of two guys kind of converging at the same time to both contest and block, eliminate a guy's shot attempt. And the way I had it in my notes was Rollins and Anthony teaming up to block Wiggins in transition was magical because it really was. But in that second quarter, there were a little bit of issues outside of Ryan Rollins and Cole Anthony. Bucks were up 45-35 after coming back from a double-digit deficit in the first quarter, and then they immediately gave up a 16-0 run to lose the lead. And this was with Giannis on the floor. So these were, that stretch was very questionable, and it seemed like the faucet just completely turned off for the Bucks. And it wasn't necessarily that the Bucks had or the Thunder had their core defensive unit in the game at the time. It was guys like Casey Wallace, but it was also guys like Aaron Wiggins and Brooks Barnheiser and those guys, which he is admittedly a lot more shifty than I thought he'd be. But it was more of those guys, more of the end of the bench guys that were coming in, and they're still great defenders. But to hold a team with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Cole Anthony and Ryan Rollins on the floor and more shooting and maybe a guy like AJ Green or Bobby Portis, that was really impressive for those guys to completely shut the faucet off on the Bucks for that large of a stretch. The Thunder ended the first half up 73-65, but then in the second half, it seemed as though Cole Anthony was just completely reborn again. He knocked down 4 out of 4 3-point attempts in the second half alone. And Ryan Rollins, I believe that between Cole and Ryan Rollins, that they combined for 20 of their 34 in the second half. So they were just completely unbelievable on both sides of the ball. And Cole Anthony's 2 assist figure for the night, it feels like it should have been way more with the amount of times that he was, again, penetrating, getting to the restricted area, and then finding corner 3-point shooters. Even though, let's say, maybe he hit Torian Prince or Gary Trent Jr., but it would be a miss. Cole Anthony should have had way more assists in this game than he did, but you know, such is life for a team that is living and dying by the three, like how the Milwaukee Bucks are right now, and how they will be going into this season. So those guys were just absolutely excellent. But now, final takeaways of not necessarily the preseason, but just this game. Jericho Sims, I also had in my notes. I've been very critical of Jericho Sims this preseason, or at least as of late. And it's just because I feel like he doesn't really have a place within the Bucks offense outside of being the token baseline lob guy when, a guy like KPJ or Cole Anthony's coming down the floor and they find Jericho Sims, running through on the baseline for a lob, which did happen in the fourth quarter of this game. And it was an incredible play. But outside of those moments, it felt like Jericho Sims, his presence out there on the floor, it just felt a little bit clunky, and it felt like he didn't really add anything in terms of being a threat on the offensive end. And not necessarily saying Jericho Sims is supposed to be this incredibly versatile scorer that needs to be, the defense needs to focus on Jericho Sims at all times, or he needs to make himself available to score. But in terms of screen setting, he would kind of come down the floor and then stand at the top of the key. And sometimes he would kind of look to his left, look to his right, and try and find other teammates to communicate. Oh, wait, am I setting a screen there? Are you setting a screen? Wait, who's coming around the top of the key to set the screen and for the handoff? Like, it just seemed like he was very hesitant, like he didn't really know where to be on the floor. And I feel like that's a very, very valuable skill for young centers in the NBA specifically, is just knowing where to be. And this is why we've seen teams like the Golden State Warriors be so successful in recent years, because they've had guys like Kevon Looney, for example, that he may not be the biggest threat on the offensive end, but he's a good rebounder and he knows exactly where to be on the floor and where to be for when the Warriors are running certain sets, like when it's a split action. Kevon Looney knows he has to be on the right wing a little bit inside the 3-point line, so then Steph comes across, his guy gets clipped on the screen, and then he fires up a three. That's just one of their set plays that he knows exactly what to do. But when things weren't as set and there wasn't as much of a game plan, rather than just we're going to have Kevin Porter Jr. penetrate the paint and kick out to a shooter, it just felt like he didn't really know where to be. And to his credit, I will say that there were a couple moments in this game against the Thunder that I felt like he was doing good things. Originally, when he first came in, he either got a rebound or he caught a pass in the paint, and then he immediately turned around and threw it back out to the top of the key to a wide open 3-point shooter. I think it was Cole Anthony, and that ended up being an assist for Jericho Sims. And then it happened a little bit later on. He threw it to the corner for another shooter. I think it was, again, a Torian Prince or someone like that, and he missed. Um, so that was very, very positive. I was really happy with seeing that. But in terms of anywhere outside of rebounding and boxing out occasionally, it felt like Jericho Sims, his presence out there was a little bit clunky. Now, Kyle Kuzma, on the other hand, I feel like his presence was pretty positive in this game. Even though you might look at the second half, he went 0 for 5 from the field in the second half, 0 for 3 from 3. What I will say to that is that they were all pretty great looks. At least the three threes that he attempted were all pretty much wide open catch and shoot threes, which just happened to not fall. Um, but Kyle Kuzma, my takeaways from especially the first half is that Kyle Kuzma looked pretty solid on both ends of the floor. Like I said in previous preseason games, defensively, he was attentive and energetic, and he was pressing up and sticking with his guy fantastically. Sure, he may have gotten blown by once or twice, but Kyle Kuzma looked solid on defense. And when it came to the offensive end, it looked like he was a lot more comfortable now being another game where he's coming off the bench and he kind of gets to fulfill a different, less reliable role, I guess you could say, or just he doesn't have as much responsibility. And it feels like this is a good place for him to start because when Kyle Kuzma got the ball, he was a lot more patient and he was much more of a playmaker than I expected him to be, especially against this level of a defensive team. Kyle Kuzma was getting to the basket and kicking out to wide open shooters in the corners, not necessarily just as much as Cole Anthony, but a fair amount, like comparable to what Cole Anthony was doing. And there were several plays where Kuzma would drive in from the right wing and then find a Torian Prince in the corner for a three that missed, but then he hit, I think, Ryan Rollins in the corner for a three that went down. He was looking for the open guy. And I feel like this is just a fantastic place to start in terms of Kyle Kuzma's development for this year and this being his full first season with the team. He was looking for the open guy. Even if it resulted in a turnover, like there was one play where he caught it with his back to the basket, then turned around into the triple threat and was eyeing the corner because he saw Ryan Rollins standing there wide open, and he threw the pass and it got tipped, hit off of maybe Bobby Portis or Giannis, and then went out of bounds. But the point was that Kyle Kuzma wasn't just looking to score; he was looking at all of his options and reading the floor. And I feel like that's just a fantastic place to start. Finally, I'll close it off by talking about Andre Jackson Jr., who he, in the late stretches of the game and in the fourth quarter, defensively, he was on point and he is just an absolute ball hawk. But on offense, he was a complete negative, and his 3-point shot, which had gone down at a 40% rate from last year, it just looked completely off base and out of rhythm. And it felt like he wasn't even really aiming the ball. He was kind of just shooting it up to the heavens and letting it fly and seeing what would happen after. Um, his jump shot just did not look great at all. And there was just still a lot of hesitance with him in terms of wanting to be assertive as a scorer. And even when the shot clock was running down and he didn't have any other choice but to let it go, it seemed like he was waiting for something else to develop, or he was thinking, oh, do I have to be the one to take this shot? But those were just my opinions. Of course, defensively, he was excellent. And I mean excellent. He was fantastic defensively in the fourth quarter. But if he can't hit a desperation three when it's a tie game or you're down by three with a minute 45 seconds left and you're basically wide open, then you get another chance maybe 30 seconds or a minute later. Um, he's not really going to find himself with a position on this team, or at least getting consistent playing time, because he needs to be able to connect on threes at the rate that he did last year. And, at the very least, even if he's not going to use his incredible athleticism, he just has got to knock down his threes, and that's just no ifs, ands, or buts. But next stop from here, we are on to the 2025-26 regular season. The preseason is over for the Milwaukee Bucks, and we will have regular season meaningful Bucks basketball to cover on this channel, and I am just absolutely fired up to get that underway. But with that being said, thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. As always, I've been your host, Dean Simon, and before you go, please make sure to leave that like, leave that comment, tell me what you think about Jericho Sims and Kuzma and Ajax, Cole and Ryan Rollins. Let me know what you think about just how this team looked against the defending champions and the reigning league MVP in the Oklahoma City Thunder and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. And let me know how excited you are for this regular season. Also, turn on those post notifications so you don't miss out on future updates and press that subscribe button. All right, guys, I will see you in the next one. Go Bucks.